It's no ordinary day, it's Friday, and it's Remote Daily Time.
Angela, it's such an honor to have you with us. And our headline of the show today that we chose is How Do I Become a Conscious Leader? If you had to answer to this headline yourself in a brief sentence, how would you respond to this question, how to become a conscious leader?
Oof, yeah, it's in a sentence. There's a lot to unpack, which I know we're going to do today, but I would say the three characteristics that I would highlight as core to being a conscious leader are being highly contextualized, understanding if it's happening in the world, it's happening at work, highly empathetic and self-aware, and also a great sense of responsibility.
Wow.
And I want to say so much more, but that's my sentence.
So contextualized, which means like kind of, I know what's going on out there. I'm like, have my seven senses on the world. Self-aware, which is probably more a personal leadership trait. And then responsible, which is probably considering my direct surroundings, right? So as like the three major pillars. I love that. It sounds so easy. It's so hard to do.
So easy.
Talking about you founded Call for Culture about a year ago. So congratulations on your new phase in life. After working with various global organizations in talent management, HR strategy, chief of people, chief of human resources, we have several experts here in the room who are from your realm of things. And we all know that human resources, being a people leader can mean so many things. But when we look at your resume, it's just amazing. There's like NASA on there. There's, executive coaching, a lot of leaders that you work with directly. So you could have probably just continued on this trajectory that you were on, but you decided to venture out and build your own company. What made you do that?
Yeah, well, I worked in, I guess, corporate America for about 15 years. I was your typical corporate titan, right? I wanted to climb the ranks. I worked 80 hours a week. I was the high achiever, the high potential, all the buzzwords, lots of potential to continue to climb. And what I found in my own experience was I was highly burnt out. Because
sorry, I'm just gonna jump in here, which you realized how?
So I realized because my body collapsed. I literally collapsed in my hallway. And so I was more than burnt out. My body was like past burnt out because, ideally when you're burnt out, usually you identify it mentally first. Like, I'm tired, lack of energy, can't go on. I feel like I can't do much more. There's not much more potential in me. I was past that point because I just kept working through it and powering through. And my body said, nope, we're not doing it anymore. And I collapsed. And that was it. That was very clear to me that I had to be doing something different. And I had already been building the business. So I already had an entrepreneurial spirit for about half of my career within industry. I knew I wanted to build something bigger and I wanted to scale it because pairing up my education and my experience with leadership teams and organizations doing similar work, I found myself going through the same, which is now our methodology, going through the same process and being able to kind of hack this intersection between business interest and employee interest. And so when that event happened to me and I was at that point of burnout, I said, it's time. I have to do it. I have to be doing something differently. And this feels like the right path.
Oh, man. But now you're an entrepreneur, which also can lead to burnout. So what do you do now? What do you do differently?
I have to tell you, Felix, it is a very different hard, like it's a different feeling of being hard and taxing. I had to unlearn a lot of things. I think not only did I experience burnout when I was working in corporate America, I also could experience what is very clear to me now as trauma. And I know we throw that word around quite a bit. But truly, when you put employees in positions where they're being discriminated against, there's micro aggressions, where I had to code switch on a day-to-day basis, that contributed to my burnout, but also trauma that I had to then leave corporate America and do something differently in my own business. So that started with me building a really responsible business and really emulating the values that I had, because the other thing that I experienced while working in corporate America was a cognitive dissonance between what these companies were telling me and what they were doing. And so now
like what? Would you mind sharing an example?
Yeah. So, I'll give you a recent example because I think it's very timely. We've had a wave of DEI, anti-racism, performative statements that have come from organizations over the last 2 or 3 years. People are now realizing that those words on a piece of paper are not being emulated within the organization and how the organization runs or how leaders are role modeling those behaviors. I experience that all the time when trying to implement culture change efforts before I started my business.
Yeah, we had a guest who was also a member of the community, an HR leader called Joe Weldon, who said that DI initiatives are often platforms of denial. And I'm always being reminded of that very stark description when somebody describes an example like that. I saw statistics the other day that a lot of initiatives have been boiled down, taken away, stripped apart over the last couple of months. Kind of, recession, can't really. Here's the denial again, all over again. And it's what a perfect recipe for burnout for everybody who works and is passionate about this part of transforming an organization. When you meet someone now as the entrepreneur that you are, you have a whole framework which we will look at it in a second. But when you meet a new client, a person inside a company that obviously is realizing something's wrong, but lives in that environment that you left purposefully, because it's crazy, it can really destroy you. Do you have like a first question that you ask when you meet someone new that you want to work with, that wants to work with you?
Ooh, that's a really great question. I think one of the questions that we tend to ask up front is around what will happen if we don't do this work? What are the risks? What's the impact to people, to business, to community, right? Because a lot of businesses are a part of the community. So what is the risk of us not doing this work is one of the questions we ask up front.
What is the risk of us not doing this work? So what would happen if we don't end up collaborating, if we don't end up working together?
Well, more so, not so much collaborating with us, but what is the risk of us not changing at this point? Or, because, everyone comes with a different symptom, right? High turnover. We've got bad results on our engagement survey. We've had rough employment engagement and relations issues. So what is the risk of us not changing at this point?
Interesting. Wow. And can you share a recent response that you got?
Yeah, I think, one of our potential clients that we're currently talking to talked about the impact of their industry, the impact of their company on their industry. So our most ideal client, the clients that we love to work with, are folks within an industry that needs work. So for example, we're working with a railroad company right now. And there's one particular organization that we're working with, and they came to us saying, we want to change the industry. It's broken. People are not treated well in this industry. So that gets us really excited, because not only can we scale the work within that organization, now this becomes a case study that we can start to scale within the industry or the sector. So what they mentioned when we asked that question was, you're seeing everything on the news about the lack of safety, right, within communities. When a train crashes with harsh chemicals in it, it can cause a huge safety risk not only for the people who are driving the train, but also the communities in which are in the surrounding area. So we're talking about lives here. It's not just safety, like, oh, someone, broke an arm or a leg. We're talking about actual livelihoods and lives.
And this happened just a few months ago, right? I mean, remember
multiple times.
Yeah. Major train chemical spill that happened in a community. And thank you for bringing up that example. What a stark example for someone who wants to not only change their organization, but really takes on an entire industry that I can only imagine is relying on, values that have been instilled probably 100 plus years ago in some ways when this industry became really big and is now just trotting along. Let's come to your pitch, to your USP, to your company, because you have this multidisciplinary approach for change. Now the railroad person is in front of you and you're like, all right, I have neuroscience here, I have anthropology, I have sociology. So what's unique about this? We're looking at your one pager right now that Liz is kindly sharing for us. What's unique about you that sets you apart from this myriad gazillion of other consulting companies out there that all promise we're going to change what you do, we're going to help you change? What's your USP?
Yeah, so a cornerstone of our approach is a meeting of the top and the bottom. So a lot of consultants focus solely on the top. How do we work with the executive team to create change and transformation? The challenge with that is that it's not, from a research perspective, we know culture change happens top down, but also it's a groundswell. So every organization has culture, even if you're not focused on it. I like to equate it to like a garden, right? So let's say you plant a garden, you're tending to your garden. The more you tend to it, the more you shape it into what you want it to be. The minute you take your eye off the garden, what happens? Weeds grow, right? It becomes a little chaotic, but it's still there. The culture still is happening. It's just not intentional, and it's probably not positive or healthy for the ecosystem that you've built. So we work bottom up and top down. And that's a really important piece because we have to enroll everyone in the organization in the change. This is not just about executives talking to employees and saying, you have to change. We're also doing some deep internal work with the leadership team. So the first phase that we work on, we spend a whole month just inviting the organization to the process, which is very underestimated. A lot of times we're like jumping right into the work. We're telling people what they need to do without co-designing or listening. And so we spent a lot of time up front inviting everyone into the organization, into the change within the organization. We're also working on the value system. Now, I'm not talking about the taglines, right? I think we do a really great job. A lot of firms do a really great job creating taglines or values, the things that go on the wall or the employee handbook.
Which often, though, then in the end sound the same because everybody wants to be respectful and transparent and progressive and open and making the world a better place. Which is so funny how after like so many years now of companies going through these like purpose journeys that so many end up with similar phrases. So you are basically going to the wall, taking down the sign that says, let's be kind to one another and ask, are you really? Or how do you do it?
Yep. So before we do that, though, we actually have an alignment conversation, and this happens over a series of months. So it's more than one conversation. What are the behaviors that tell me that you're being kind? If I was rolling a camera, what am I seeing? What am I experiencing? And the secret sauce, I think, for us is also we get very clear about the opposite. What does unkind look like? Because what we find within organizations is toxic workplaces typically stem from people who can't name the issue. It's like, I know that's wrong. That doesn't feel quite right, but it's been accepted for all these years. So is it wrong? And you kind of you're too close to it. So we need to create language to also call out and hold people accountable. And then we assess against that. That's the point where now we're asking everybody, okay, here are the behaviors of being kind or whatever that buzzword is. Are we doing that? And how far away are we from our aspiring culture?
I'm actually going to share my screen now because John just pointed us towards Atlassian, a company that is famous for its mobile or flexible work policies, its very progressive stance on values. And I'm just going to share the values from Atlassian right here to give an example of how you approach your work. Because what I always love about these values is everybody could take these values and put them on their wall. I mean, these are great, but it would actually be surprising if a company would say, we're a closed company with a lot of bullshit. We are built without heart and balance. We screw our customers all the time. We don't play as a team, and we don't encourage people to bring any change. That would be a surprising value. All these values are not surprising. So you are actually reverse engineering this, and you are asking, okay, so what is closed then? And what would bullshit mean? What would mean you're without balance? What would mean you're not playing as a team? And then sort of reverse engineering that. I find that fascinating. And I would love to do that with my own team as well, because that's what I think everybody needs to do. And Deb is just also pointing in, if you have these values, it's critical to also measure them and add them to individuals' performance reviews. Is that also something that you do?
Yep. So once we develop, so what we end up developing is we call it a culture charter. So it's just how do we memorialize what you just mentioned on paper with words? Then there's a point around operationalizing that and baking that into every touch point from an employee experience perspective, but also the reinforcers in our organization that will make this sustainable. So what we know is a lot of times we focus a lot on surface level culture change. People saying we're going to do things differently, executives talking in town halls about how we're an open company. But you know an iceberg, right? You have the image in your head. There's that big chunk right below the waterline. Our goal is to chip away at that big chunk underneath the waterline and bring it to the surface. And the way we do that is by baking and building it to everything that we do. And that includes surface level stuff like our website, like how we talk about our company and social media. But also, this may sound kind of harsh, but who are we holding people accountable? Like, are we holding people accountable? Are people getting fired from the organization from consistently devaluing our values? Because that is also a symbol and a sign that we're staying true to those behaviors that we've said are important. And that's a really, really hard thing for organizations and leaders to accept. But sometimes you have to pull those weeds.
So many tough questions today here on Remote Daily. I love this. And you brought such an amazing question when we asked you, what could we share with the community as a question for everyone? As you all know, we use a new tool called Menti that helps us visualize your thoughts and your opinions. And Liz is going to share the Menti question now with you all because it's halftime already on Remote Daily. I can't believe how fast this hour is going by. And we want you to respond. We ask for your opinion on Angela's question, which is, what is the legacy you want to have? ? Just a tiny little question for you all today for this rainy weekend. What is the legacy you want to have? What is your response to that? The person who lived forever, leaving the world a better place. I was helpful and funny. Integrity, kindness. I brought people together. Just a few of your responses here. Thank you all for sharing. And Angela, what's your own response?
Yeah, well, these are great answers. Thank you, everyone, for responding. I would like my legacy to be that we blur the lines between workplace culture and social impact. I have much more to say about that, but yes, that is the legacy I'm leaving, and that's the Call for Culture platform, which is great because they tie together.
And Jules also chimed in through the chat. Thank you, Jules. To leave the earth in a more harmonious way than when I arrived. I guess, Angela, +1 from you on that. I wonder though, is there an example you could give for what you just shared as your own legacy, the sort of like blend from work into social that you're aiming for?
Yeah, so I have a really deep response, but I'm going to try to keep it short. So, the way that we work is by design dehumanized. We went through an industrial revolution. I'm going to say industrial one more time because it's shaped the way we do work. It's shaped the way management, leadership, business practices have been shaped over time. I think what we're experiencing now is a humanizing of work. And we're now realizing that there are social issues that are directly connected with how business and work gets done. I'll give you an example. I was reading an article recently about how toxic workplace cultures can be contributing to the mental health issues within our country, within the US specifically, and probably the world. Also, toxic workplace cultures can be considered a public health risk. Those are really big, meaty issues that we have to understand the responsibility of an organization within the social context, which is why being contextual as a leader is so important, and it's going to be important for the future of work.
Okay, so I'm gonna share two examples here that I just heard of from friends of mine just over the last 48 hours. One friend told me about the CEO calling on her, who is a VP, in a meeting, calling her out from working from home, despite it being legal in the company. He was like, "So I see you're not in the office; you're at home. Why?" In a public company meeting. And she said, "Well, I'm taking care of my mom. She's dying." And he said, "Oh, I didn't know that." And I just listened to her sharing a story, and I thought, what has to go wrong in a chain reaction for a leadership of a company to arrive at that conversation? The other one was that I heard of was a team offsite where one leader arrived so worked up about their own workplace that instead of focusing on the workshop, they just cut people off mid-sentence and basically kidnapped the workshop to vent about how bad everybody was doing their job. And what made me wonder about both instances, just like what you said, there seems to be on both ends, there seem to be mental health issues that are happening in live while these conversations are happening. People are not feeling well. They're not doing well. They're suffering. And also, I thought none of them would probably show this behavior at home. Like this seems to be such a thing I take to work because that's when I'm all serious and mean to people. And I also realized that myself that I fall into a different code. You talked in the beginning about code switching sometimes when I talk to clients of Remote Daily. And I'm always wondering, why are we so unconscious, to come back to the title of our show today, about that? What are we afraid of? What's your take on that?
It's learned behavior. So I would say for leaders who behave badly at work, they have seen it work for other people and they've adopted it. Which, presents a case of, well, I don't have to be conscious at work, right? I can just, exert my dominance and, be aggressive and all that will work for me because it's the only thing that's worked for me in the past. I think we have a false sense of what leadership is within organizations. I think it's tied to our values as a country in the US, and it doesn't point to transformational leadership. It points to command and control, which has worked well for businesses up until this point. I also think we've been taught, socialized, to see work as a container separate from life. And so professionalism is a great example of this. We've been taught we need to dress a certain way, act a certain way, and that's where code switching comes from. And a lot of those behaviors are based in certain characteristics of of lack of inclusivity around what leadership or professionalism or right or wrong could look like. So there's many layers to this, but I think the main thing is, honestly, it goes back to that Industrial Revolution comment I made before. We've built a system that is not for everybody, and it's based in productivity and outputs, not humanity and innovation and creativity and inclusivity.
And this factory style thinking also leads to what Deb, who's a longtime people leader, shared in the chat about leaders or companies deeming leaders as unreplaceable. And no behavior they ever show is off limits because they have that thing in the chain, that position that they need to be in for whatever reason. And so it doesn't matter. They just things have to go on. Like whatever they say, it's okay. We'll get through it. So very interesting what you're sharing. And just one more thing about that. Is there, from your own experience, how do you cope with that as a leader now with your own team, now that you have started a company and you're in the leadership position? Like, do you have a way to, because you also learned those behaviors, you said you have to unlearn a lot of things, but how do you address this pain point within your own company?
I lean on empathy and equity quite a bit. So what I mean by that is, so when we talk about equity, a lot of times people get it confused with equality. And I think I think there's a place for equality, but not necessarily when it comes to learning and humanizing your team and the people on your team, because everybody needs something different to succeed. So my goal as a leader, of course, is to strategize, set vision, direct the company. But my second role is to build relationships and to learn my team as humans so I can best support them and empower them to do their best work. So I spend a lot of time understanding their needs, allowing them to take the reins when it comes to the work, not making assumptions based on my own bias around how I think things should be done. And these are all things that take time. They take time to step back and to ask the question and to have the conversation. And I think also supporting your team and telling them you have their back. The buck will always stop with me when it comes to clients, when it comes to partners. I am always telling my team I have their back and I got you. And I think that's really important. And they feel that air cover so they can do their best work.
Mic drop on that one. I think the most furious I get is when leaders sort of step aside and say, "Oh, yeah, sure, attack him. Here you go."
Yeah.
This is one of the behaviors that I despise the most, and it's also fear-based and based on many of the things that you share. But I was just reminded of how much of a strong reaction I have to that when I see that happening, and how much of a strong urge to protect I sometimes feel when somebody, which fortunately rarely happens, but wants to go after somebody that I work with. It gets very emotional and very non-worky pretty quick. I would like to encourage all of you to ask Angela questions, because today's session is such a learning moment for me. I already learned so much from you, Angela, and I want to thank you for that. But I want to encourage you all to use Menti, get your questions in. We already have 3 questions that came in, and we want to address those. One more thing before we get to the community questions here. You have a podcast, Angela, you started together with your new business called Social Responsibility at Work. I listened in and I thought, can I ask you this, because it's such a brutal question for podcasters who go through these like hour-long conversations. Can I ask you for maybe some standout pieces of advice, because you interview people and you really ask them for advice, and you have yourself done a lot of advocacy, especially for women in the workplace. And I think everybody who is listening right now can hear this, how much you strive and how passionate you are about empowering others. Is there any advice that you have received from leaders on your podcast, leaders that you have maybe also worked with in the past, that you want to share with us? Advice that helped you further your own personality, further your company, that made you unlearn things?
I think leadership is just a deep internal work. It's a lot of self-awareness. But I think when I think about my own leadership and values, I kind of use the same process that I use with organizations. I check in on my value system frequently. I'm very in tune now with how my body reacts to misalignment. Those are things so in order to do that, you have to create space for it. And also realizing you can't do all the things. So hiring a team that is super brilliant and smarter than you is, I mean, I know that's easier said than done, but thinking creatively about how you can match your purpose with other people's purpose. That doesn't always mean a full-time job. That could mean a collaboration, a partnership, contracting. I mean, there's so many ways to bring expertise into your organization. And so I think thinking creatively about what work actually is and what it means to contribute to my purpose, to other people's purposes and mission, all those things come to mind initially.
And question. To push you again on that, any podcast guest you had that left you with a advice or a phrase or a tool that you can share?
Ooh. There is, oh my gosh, there's so many. So we have about 120 episodes. So I'm like visualizing all the episodes in my head. The last episode we just had with Latanya, we talked about how do we kind of keep the integrity around DEI within the work we're doing without burning out, because we are getting so much pushback. Yeah. And so that episode just feels like a collective hug, I feel like, for the community that is passionate about this. So it's not a tool. It's just more of a let's check in community and realize that we need to now double down on some of these important value systems. And how do we continue to do that in the face of some pushback?
Oh man, that sounds great. Yeah, I feel like that's the same conversation we're having right now. It's just when Jade was talking about what you want to do on the weekend, I just want to like curl up and just
that's what I visualized.
cuddle. And yes. I think this is what Remote Daily is today, because it's so great to hear that you're out there and you're doing this work and you're not letting yourself be put down by the workplaces that you have seen yourself and that you left. But you come back, you turn around and you say, okay, let's face it. There's a lot not working out and I'm here to change it, not only top down, but also bottom up. Fascinating. I want to bring in the question that was voted up as a last question about tech tools. I think that's a fascinating question, especially in our day and age where HR, learning and development, leadership, everything is people are trying to put it into tools, ideally tools that work with AI and that crunch a lot of data into like visible outcomes that then everybody can latch onto. We don't know whether that's going to work, but that's what the buzz is right now. So anything that you want to share with us? The question is, are there any HR/work tech tools that you encourage companies to consider to help operationalize the strategy and mission beyond just learning management system? So this is a tough one because it basically invites you to share really a revolutionary tech with us, not just tech that is used in the HR space already, but tech that goes maybe a little more beyond that because it changes the way the company operates, builds its culture, builds its mission. Is there anything that you could share that maybe came up in your recent work?
Yeah, so this is a tough one for me because I'm a little disenchanted at the moment with the amount of tech tools out there, especially in the HR space. I think we're very saturated with these tools right now. I think what's important is to take a step back and understand what we're looking to accomplish. There are some really basic tools that can enable a lot. And I think, to your point, Felix, we have to have our pulse on what are the tools that are making an impact within the workplace. So honestly, one of the tools that I use for many things within my team, and I recommend this within organization, or organizations is some kind of like workflow board. So that could be your Asana, your Monday.com, your Process Street. We want to create ease and lack of mental cartwheels within organizations. That can do a lot for the culture. It creates clarity, and with clarity comes autonomy. We want to reduce friction between cross-functional teams. So even though like a Monday.com is not a revolutionary tool, it can do a lot for the culture. And I'm not getting paid for Monday.com. We use Monday.com internally, and I always recommend it. If used right, it can really be a source of clarity, autonomy, and accountability, which I think can go really far. And yes, John, I agree. The simpler, the better. I think we can get really excited about a smorgasbord of tools. But I think taking a step back and understanding the outcome first before you implement is really important.
And Monday.com, by the way, if you're a New York City subway rider like I am, they're all over the place. They're all over the billboards. They're really pushing their marketing, and they seem to be growing and investing. However, you just talked about what was the term that you used?
Smorgasbord. Charcuterie is a better word.
Because honestly, I mean, when we, let's just take a look at the website right now, at the homepage of Monday.com, because what if not a smorgasbord is what we see here? Creative and design, software development, marketing, project management, sales and CRM, task management, HR operations, and more workflows. So that is pretty much everything that you could think of. What is a tool within that suite that you really recommend? Is there maybe one Monday.com thing that you use more than others or found more helpful than others?
Yeah, so we use the project management boards to set up clarity and integration for any initiative we're approaching as a team. So it's less about project management and more about how do we get people inspired about the work we're doing and create a path so that everybody's on the same page. So we use the project management boards. We store all of our information there. We create a one-stop shop. Everyone can provide their updates asynchronously, so we don't have to meet every day. So it reduces meeting time and creates some seamlessness around getting the work done, but also being inspired and clear about the work.
Fantastic. And I think it also ties in with what John is sharing here in the chat. If you really focus on the impact that the tools that you use are having, instead of just, maybe, they could bring us like an easier lead generation or an easier way to the clients, but really what impact it has on the team that's working with you, then it is actually helpful. So thank you. And Monday.com, if you're listening, yes, we are taking on sponsors. You can reach out to us anytime. This was an unpaid promotion for an amazing new platform that's out there in the workplace. And I think we learned a lot from you, Angela, today. I want to go back to the very beginning of the session. You said contextualized, self-aware, and responsible. That is the conscious leader. And I think you taught us about how to get there on all of these steps. So thank you. And this is from Hannes and from all of us. If you have a chance to switch on your camera, virtual glitter time on Remote Daily in music and with your fingers, stretch it out there from all over the world. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Hannes, and it's high E. Thank you, Angela. I would love to continue this conversation with you. I wish the show had 2 hours. What is your final message to all of us before we part ways into this weekend? What would you like to leave us with today?
Leadership is legacy, and you all thought about the legacy you're looking to leave. And I would challenge you to think about those two things as interconnected. And I can't wait to see what you all will impact the world with. So thank you, everyone.
Wow. Mic drop.
Thank you, Angela.